The throne room of Valdrin Castle fell silent as the Alpha King entered. Elira pressed herself against the stone pillar, making her body as small as possible while the procession passed. She had been warned about this moment during her first hour in the castle. When the king moves, you become invisible. When the king speaks, you become deaf. When the king looks your way, you remember that he cannot see you at all, because King Kaelin of Valdrin, ruler of the 7 wolf territories, was blind. She watched him now from behind her pillar, this legendary figure she had heard whispered about in fearful tones since childhood. He walked with one hand resting on the arm of his advisor, Lord Varen, his steps measured and careful. A length of black silk covered his eyes, tied at the back of his head, hiding what the servants said were scarred, empty sockets from an assassination attempt 3 years prior. Yet even blind and diminished, he commanded the room, simply by breathing. He was tall and broad across the shoulders, in a way that made the ornate throne seem modest when he finally settled into it. His dark hair was swept back from a face that looked carved from winter itself, sharp cheekbones, a jaw that could have been cut from granite, and lips pressed into a line that suggested he had forgotten how to smile. The nobles arranged themselves before him, and Elira could taste the tension in the air. Something was happening today, something important. The accused will step forward, Lord Varen announced, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling. A man was dragged from the crowd by 2 guards. His fine clothing marked him as nobility, but his face was twisted with terror. "Your Majesty? Please," he gasped, falling to his knees. "I am innocent of these charges. I would never conspire against the crown." King Kaelin sat motionless on his throne, his covered eyes pointed somewhere above the man's head. When he spoke, his voice was low and cold, like stones shifting at the bottom of a frozen river. "You were heard discussing my assassination with Lord Fenwick in the Eastern Garden." A pause. "You believed no one was listening." "Lies!" the man shrieked. "Who claims to have heard this? I demand to face my accuser." The king's head tilted slightly, and for one unsettling moment, Elira could have sworn he was looking directly at the accused despite the blindfold. "I heard it myself." Murmurs rippled through the court. Elira saw several nobles exchange glances, confusion and disbelief mingling on their faces. "Your Majesty," Lord Varen interjected smoothly. "What the king means is that our network of loyal servants reported this treasonous conversation in precise detail." "Yes," the king said flatly. "That is what I mean." The accused man was still protesting his innocence when the guards dragged him away. Elira looked down at the floor, trying to calm her racing heart. She should not be here. New servants were supposed to remain in the lower quarters for their first fortnight, learning the rhythms of the castle before being permitted into the royal spaces. But the head housekeeper had fallen ill, and someone needed to deliver fresh linens to the throne room's antechamber. Elira, being the newest and therefore most expendable, had been shoved into the task with minimal instruction. Now she was trapped, unable to leave without crossing directly in front of the throne, unable to stay hidden much longer as the pillar provided increasingly inadequate cover. She shifted her weight, trying to peer around the stone to see if the proceedings were ending. Her foot caught on the hem of her dress, and she stumbled, her shoulder striking the pillar with a soft thud. The sound was barely audible over the murmuring court. But King Kaelin's head snapped toward her with predatory precision. Elira froze. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to bow, to apologize, but she could not move. Those silk-covered eyes were fixed on her exact position with an accuracy that should have been impossible for a blind man. "Who is there?" Lord Varen demanded, following his king's gaze. "Show yourself." Elira stepped out from behind the pillar on trembling legs. She dropped into the lowest curtsy she could manage without falling over. "Forgive me, my lords. I am only a maid. I was delivering linens and became trapped when the court assembled. I meant no intrusion." She kept her eyes on the floor, but she could feel the king's attention on her, like the heat of a flame held too close to skin. "Rise," Lord Varen commanded. "Let us see your face." Elira straightened slowly. She was plain, she knew. Brown hair that refused to hold a curl, eyes the color of rain-washed earth, a face that had never inspired poetry or second glances. She was built for invisibility, for blending into stone walls and empty corridors. Yet as she lifted her gaze, she found King Kaelin leaning forward on his throne, his entire body oriented toward her with an intensity that stole her breath. "Your name," he said. Not a question, a command. "Elira, Your Majesty." "Elira Vance." "Alara," he repeated, and something about the way her name sounded in his voice made her stomach tighten. "You will attend me." The court erupted in shocked whispers. Lord Varen stepped closer to the throne, his expression troubled. "Your Majesty, surely one of your established attendants would be more suitable." "She will attend me," the king repeated, his tone brooking no argument. "Have her brought to my chambers within the hour." Alira's pulse thundered in her ears. This was wrong. This was impossible. A new servant, invisible and unremarkable, suddenly summoned to the private chambers of the most powerful wolf in the 7 territories? As the guards escorted her from the throne room, she risked one final glance over her shoulder. King Kaelin had settled back into his throne, his posture relaxed, and his covered eyes still tracking her movement with perfect, impossible accuracy. And in the shadow beneath that black silk blindfold, Elira could have sworn she saw the faintest curve of a smile. The king's chambers existed in perpetual twilight. Elira hesitated at the threshold, her arms laden with fresh bedding that suddenly felt like armor against whatever waited within. Heavy curtains blocked every window. Only a handful of candles provided illumination, their flames casting trembling shadows across walls, decorated with tapestries depicting wolves hunting beneath silver moons. "Of course he keeps it dark," she reasoned. "A blind man has no need of light." Yet something about the deliberate dimness felt staged. "Enter," called that cold voice, from somewhere in the shadows. Elira stepped inside, her eyes struggling to adjust. She could make out the shape of an enormous bed against the far wall, a writing desk covered in papers, and tall bookshelves stuffed with volumes that seemed excessive for someone who could not read. And there, standing by the cold fireplace, was King Kaelin. He had removed his formal robes, wearing only a simple black tunic that clung to the broad planes of his chest. The blindfold remained, that strip of silk hiding whatever ruins lay beneath. His head turned as she approached, tracking her footsteps with unnerving accuracy. "You are afraid," he observed. Elira's grip tightened on the linens. "I am merely cautious, Your Majesty. I do not understand why I have been summoned. Do you not?" He moved toward her, his steps fluid despite his supposed disability. A servant girl hiding behind pillars, witnessing matters of treason and execution. Most would consider that suspicious. Her blood chilled. "I was only delivering linens. I swear it on my life." "Your life," he repeated, and the words hung between them like a blade waiting to fall. Such a fragile thing to wager. He stopped mere inches from her, close enough that she could smell pine and wood smoke, and something underneath that was purely animal. Her wolf senses, dormant since childhood, stirred in recognition of something they should not be recognizing. Alpha. Something whispered in the deepest part of her mind. True alpha. But that was impossible. She had buried that part of herself years ago, after what happened to her mother. She was human now. Only human. "You will tend my chambers," the king said abruptly, stepping back. "Bring my meals, change my linens, report anything you observe to no one but me." Elira blinked. "You want me to be your personal attendant? I want you where I can monitor you." His voice sharpened. "Until I determine whether you are a spy, a fool, or simply extraordinarily unlucky." He turned away, dismissing her, and Elira released a breath she had not realized she was holding. She moved through the chamber mechanically, replacing linens, straightening items on shelves, performing the work she had been trained for. But her mind raced. Something was deeply wrong here. The way he moved, the way he tracked sound, the way his covered eyes seemed to find her no matter where she stood. The books, she realized suddenly. The shelves were stuffed with books he could not possibly read, and on the desk, half hidden beneath scattered papers, she glimpsed something that stopped her heart. A document covered in fresh handwriting, bold, masculine script that was still glistening with wet ink. Someone had been writing at this desk mere minutes ago. Someone who could see. Elira's hands trembled as she finished her work. She did not look at the document again, did not let her gaze linger on any of the inconsistencies that suddenly seemed to crowd the room. But as she turned to leave, she found the king standing directly in her path. "You noticed something," he said quietly. It was not a question. Elira shook her head, perhaps too quickly. Nothing, Your Majesty. Only dust that needs attention. For a long moment, he simply stood there, his covered eyes boring into her with an intensity that made her feel stripped bare. Then he stepped aside. Same time tomorrow, he said. Do not be late. Elira fled the chamber with her heart in her throat, one thought burning through her mind. The king of Valdrin was not blind at all. 3 weeks passed, and Elira learned to live with secrets. She learned the rhythms of the king's deception, the subtle ways he maintained his ruse, how he would stumble slightly when others were present but moved with fluid grace when they were alone, how he kept his chambers deliberately dark so visitors would not question his lack of sight, how Lord Varenne always stood close enough to guide him, playing his role in a performance that the entire court accepted without question. And she learned that he watched her constantly, not obviously, not in ways that anyone else would notice, but Elira felt his attention like a weight against her skin, tracking her movements as she worked. Sometimes she would turn suddenly and catch the faint tilt of his head, the slight tension in his shoulders that suggested he had been studying her just a moment before. He knows that I know, she realized. And yet he lets me live. The question of why kept her awake at night. You move quietly, the king observed one evening as she collected his dinner dishes. Like a ghost through these halls. Elira did not look up from her work. I was trained to be unobtrusive, Your Majesty. Were you? He rose from his chair by the fireplace, and she forced herself not to flinch as he approached. Or is it something more instinctive? Something in your blood? The question struck too close to truths she had buried long ago. I am merely a servant, Your Majesty. There is nothing remarkable about my blood. Liar. The word was soft, almost gentle, but it froze her in place. The king circled her slowly, and she could hear him inhaling, scenting the air around her in a way that was distinctly wolfish. You suppress it, he murmured. Crush it down so deep that you have almost convinced yourself it does not exist. But I smell it on you, Elira. The wolf you refuse to become. Her hands shook as she set down the dishes. You are mistaken. Am I? He stopped directly behind her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. Then why does your pulse race when I draw near? Why do your eyes flash gold when you think no one is watching? Elira spun to face him, denial on her lips, but the words died when she saw his expression. He had lifted the blindfold. For the first time, she saw his eyes, not scarred, not empty, but a piercing silver that seemed to glow with inner fire, eyes that saw everything, eyes that were fixed on her with an intensity that made her knees weaken. You? She gasped. I see perfectly, he confirmed. I have seen perfectly since the moment I claimed this throne. The blindness is a mask, a trap for the traitors who circle me like carrion birds, waiting for weakness. Elira stumbled backward, her mind reeling. Why are you telling me this? Because you already knew. He advanced on her, slowly, deliberately. You knew from the first day, and you told no one. You kept my secret without being asked, without any promise of reward or threat of punishment. Her back struck the wall. There was nowhere left to retreat. I need to know why, he said, his voice dropping to something raw and urgent. I need to know what you are. I am no one, she whispered. You are everything. His hand rose to tilt her chin upward with surprising gentleness. I have watched you for weeks, Elira. I have studied every expression, every gesture, every time you thought yourself unobserved, and I still cannot unravel you. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone, and heat flooded through her veins. That buried part of her, the wolf she had spent years denying, surged toward the surface in response to his touch. No, she told herself desperately. Not again. Never again. But her body was not listening. Her eyes burned, and she knew without seeing that they were shifting color, gold bleeding into brown, revealing everything she had fought to conceal. The king inhaled sharply, and something flickered across his face. Recognition, wonder, hunger. There you are, he breathed. Before she could respond, the chamber door burst open. Your Majesty. Lord Varenne stood in the doorway, his face pale with urgency. Forgive the intrusion, but the northern scouts have returned. There has been an attack. The king released her instantly, the blindfold dropping back into place with practiced ease. When he turned to face his advisor, he was once again the blind ruler, helpless and dependent. Report, he commanded. Lord Varen's eyes flickered briefly to Elira, suspicion darkening his features. "Perhaps we should speak privately, Your Majesty." Elira stays. The king's tone permitted no argument. "She is my eyes in these chambers. I trust her completely." The lie was smooth, seamless. But as Lord Varen began his report about border attacks and mounting casualties, Elira could still feel the ghost of the king's touch against her jaw, and she could feel his attention on her still, watching from behind his mask of silk, waiting to see what she would do with the secrets he had revealed. The attacks had begun 3 days before Lord Varen's interruption. Now, a fortnight later, each strike landed closer to the heart of the kingdom. Elira listened from the shadows as generals and advisors crowded the king's war room, debating strategies and pointing at maps with increasing desperation. The raiders came from nowhere and vanished like smoke, leaving only destruction in their wake. 3 villages burned, 2 noble families slaughtered. And always, the attackers seemed to know exactly where the kingdom's defenses were weakest. "There is a traitor among us," Lord Varen declared, during one particularly heated meeting. "Someone is feeding them information." Elira watched King Kaelin carefully. His face remained impassive behind the blindfold, but she saw the slight tension in his jaw that meant he was thinking, calculating. "Then we must flush them out," he said quietly. That night, when the advisors had gone, and Elira came to tend his chambers, the king was waiting by the window. The curtains were drawn back for once, moonlight spilling across his features. "Close the door," he said without turning. Elira obeyed, her pulse quickening. Since the night he had revealed his secret, something had shifted between them. He no longer pretended blindness when they were alone. He watched her openly now, tracking her movements with those pale, piercing eyes. And sometimes she caught him looking at her with an expression she could not name. "You know who the traitor is," she said. It was not a question. He turned to face her, the blindfold already removed. "I have suspected for months. But suspicion is not proof." "Who?" His jaw tightened. "Lord Varen." The name struck her like a physical blow. Lord Varen, his most trusted advisor, the man who guided him through court, who stood at his side during every public appearance, who knew every detail of the kingdom's defenses. "You're certain?" "I am certain of nothing." The king moved toward her with fluid grace. "That is why I need you." Elira's stomach tightened. "Me? Varen watches me constantly, but he pays no attention to servants. You are invisible to him in ways I can never be." He stopped before her, close enough to touch but keeping his hands at his sides. "I need you to discover proof of his treachery. You want me to spy on your own advisor. I want you to help me save my kingdom." His voice roughened. "I am asking, Elira, not commanding. I will not force this burden upon you." She should refuse. This was dangerous beyond measure. If Lord Varen was truly a traitor, he would kill her without hesitation if he discovered her purpose. But when she looked into those pale, piercing eyes, she saw something that made her chest ache. Beneath the power, beneath the cold authority, there was loneliness. The isolation of a man who could trust no one, who had been betrayed so thoroughly that he was forced to hide behind a pretense of weakness just to survive. "I'll do it," she whispered. Relief flooded his features, followed quickly by something deeper. "You understand what you risk?" "I understand." He reached for her then, his hand curving around the back of her neck with gentle possessiveness. "If anything happens to you, nothing will happen. You cannot promise that." His thumb stroked along her pulse point, and she felt her wolf strain toward the surface again. "I should not allow this. I should send you somewhere safe, somewhere far from court and its poisoned games." "Then why don't you?" The question hung between them, charged with everything they had not said. The king's eyes dropped to her lips, and for one breathless moment, she thought he might kiss her. Instead, he released her and stepped back, his expression shuddering. "Because I am selfish," he said quietly. "Because the thought of you leaving is worse than the thought of you in danger." He stopped himself, shaking his head. "Get some rest," he said, his voice rough. "Tomorrow, we begin." Elira left his chambers with her wolf restless inside her chest. She was in danger, she knew. Not just from Lord Varen, but from the feelings that grew stronger each day. She was halfway down the corridor when she heard footsteps behind her. Elira Vance. She turned to find Lord Varen emerging from the shadows, his handsome face arranged in a pleasant smile that did not reach his eyes. Lord Varen. She dropped into a curtsy, praying her voice remained steady. How may I serve you? You spend quite a bit of time in the king's private chambers, he observed, moving closer. More time than any servant should require. His Majesty requires extensive care. His blindness. Yes. Varen's smile sharpened. His blindness. Such a tragedy for a man who was once so powerful. One almost wonders how he survived the assassination attempt at all. The words were casual, but something in his tone made her skin crawl. I should return to my quarters, she said carefully. Unless there is something you require? Lord Varen studied her for a long moment, his gaze probing. No, he said finally. Nothing at present, but Elira, a word of advice. He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. Be very careful where you place your loyalties in this castle. The wrong choice can prove fatal. He stepped back, that pleasant smile returning. Sleep well, he said, and vanished back into the shadows. Elira stood frozen in the empty corridor, her blood running cold. Lord Varen suspected something. And if he was truly the traitor, if he had truly orchestrated the assassination attempt 3 years ago, then she had just become a target. From somewhere deep in the castle, a wolf howled, long and mournful, and Elira realized with terrible clarity that the game had already begun. The following days blurred into a dangerous rhythm. Elira moved through the castle like a wraith, performing her duties as the king's attendant while secretly observing Lord Varen's movements. She noted who he spoke with in shadowed alcoves, which messengers arrived, bearing unmarked letters, and how often he disappeared into the eastern tower where no servants were permitted. Each night, she reported her findings to King Kaelin. He meets with Lady Morgath after every council session, she told him on the 4th evening. They speak in whispers, and she always burns something in the fireplace afterward. The king listened with his blindfold removed, his silver eyes intent on her face. Lady Morgath, her husband controls the northern border passes, the same passes the raiders have been using. Something primal blazed across his features. You have done well, Elira. The praise warmed her more than it should have. She had begun to crave these nightly meetings, these stolen hours where she could see him as he truly was. There is something else, she said hesitantly. Lord Varen has been asking about me. Where I came from, who my family was. The king went very still. What did you tell him? Nothing. I claim to be an orphan from the southern villages, as my records state. But, Elira hesitated. The truth was dangerous, but she found she could not lie to him. Not anymore. He does not believe me, she admitted. Yesterday, he cornered me in the kitchens. Asked if I had ever lived in the Thornwood region. The king's expression darkened. Thornwood. Why would he ask about Thornwood? Because that was where Elira had been born. Where her mother had been burned as a witch when Elira was barely 7 years old. Where the pack that had sheltered them had been slaughtered by hunters who claimed to be acting on royal orders. I do not know, she lied. The king studied her, and she knew he sensed the deception. But he did not press. You will not go anywhere alone from now on, he commanded. If Varen suspects you, you are in danger. I can protect myself. Can you? He rose from his chair and crossed to her. Show me. Before she could react, he moved. One moment he was standing before her. The next, he had her pinned against the wall, his forearm across her collarbone. His body a cage of muscle and heat. Fight back, he growled. Instinct took over. Her wolf, dormant for so long, surged with explosive force. She twisted beneath his grip, her movements faster and stronger than any human should possess. Her hand found his throat, claws she did not know she had pressing against his pulse. They froze, both, breathing hard. There she is, the king whispered, and there was wonder in his voice. There is the wolf you have been hiding. Elira released him immediately, stumbling backward in horror. She stared at her hands, watching the claws retract into ordinary fingernails. I cannot, she gasped. I swore I would never. Never what? Never be what you truly are? My mother was killed for what she was. The words tore from her throat before she could stop them. The pack that raised me was slaughtered. Everyone I loved died because of what runs in my blood. Understanding dawned in the king's eyes. The Thornwood Massacre. 16 years ago. Elira nodded, tears burning behind her eyes. Lord Varen knows. Somehow he knows who I am, what I am. And if he exposes me, he will not touch you. The king's voice was absolute. I will not allow it. You cannot protect me from your own advisor without revealing your secret. Then I will reveal it. She stared at him in shock. You would expose yourself? Everything you have worked for? He moved toward her slowly, giving her time to retreat. When she did not, he cupped her face in his hands with devastating gentleness. I would burn this kingdom to ash before I let anyone harm you, he said quietly. Do you understand? You are not just a servant to me, Alira. You have not been for some time now. Her heart stuttered. What am I, then? His thumb traced her lower lip, and she saw his wolf in his eyes, silver bleeding into gold. Mine, he breathed. The word resonated through her bones, awakening something deep and undeniable. Her wolf recognized his claim, howled in response, demanded that she close the distance between them. The chamber door crashed open. Your Majesty. A guard stood in the doorway, panic written across his face. Lord Varen has called an emergency assembly. He claims to have evidence of a traitor in the castle. The king released her instantly, the blindfold materializing in his hands. Alira, he said quietly, his back to her. Stay here. Bar the door. Do not open it for anyone but me. Let me come with you. No. The word was sharp, final. Whatever happens in that assembly, I need to know you are safe. He was gone before she could argue, the guard escorting him toward the great hall. Alira stood alone in the darkened chamber, her wolf pacing restlessly beneath her skin, every instinct screaming that something terrible was about to happen. She should stay. She should obey. Instead, she slipped into the servants' corridor and followed. The great hall was packed with nobles, servants, and guards. When Alira found a hidden alcove behind one of the massive tapestries, through a gap in the fabric, she could see the raised dais where King Kaelan sat on his throne, Lord Varen standing beside him with an expression of righteous fury. I have uncovered a conspiracy against the crown, Varen announced, his voice ringing through the hall. A plot so insidious that it strikes at the very heart of our kingdom. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Alira pressed closer to the gap. For months, I have suspected that someone close to the king has been feeding information to our enemies. Varen paused dramatically. Tonight, I have proof. He gestured, and 2 guards dragged a figure into the hall. Alira's blood froze. It was Mira, the young kitchen maid, who had shown her the servants' passages during her first week. The girl's face was bruised, her eyes swollen from crying. This servant was caught attempting to send a coded message to the northern raiders, Varen declared. Under questioning, she confessed everything. Mira's voice was barely audible. I did not. I only did what I was told. By whom? Varen demanded. Tell the court who gave you your orders. Mira's terrified gaze swept the hall, and for one horrible moment, it locked with Alira's, through the gap in the tapestry. The new maid, Mira whispered. Alira Vance. The hall erupted in chaos. Alira stumbled backward. This was a trap. Varen had manufactured evidence, tortured a confession from an innocent girl, all to eliminate the threat Alira posed to his schemes. She had to run, had to escape before the guards found her, but as she turned toward the servants' corridor, strong hands seized her from behind. Going somewhere? Lord Varen's voice was silk over steel. He must have slipped out during the commotion, anticipated her presence. Alira struggled, but more guards appeared, pinning her arms behind her back. You made a terrible mistake, she spat. Did I? Varen leaned close, his breath hot against her ear. I know what you are, wolf child. I know exactly what bloodline runs through your veins. Did you think I would not recognize the daughter of the Thornwood Witch? Ice flooded her veins. How? Your mother was powerful, powerful enough that killing her required considerable resources. His smile was cruel. I should know. I am the one who ordered the hunters. The revelation hit her like a physical blow. Varen. Lord Varen had killed her mother, slaughtered her pack, and destroyed everything she had ever loved. You, she breathed, rage igniting in her chest. Me, he straightened, adjusting his robes. And now I will finish what I started. He nodded to the guards. Bring her. Alira was dragged through the corridors, her wolf howling for release. But iron shackles had been clamped around her wrists, the metal burning against her skin. Wolf's bane, The shackles were laced with wolf's bane, suppressing her ability to shift. The great hall fell silent as she was thrown to her knees before the throne. King Kaelin sat motionless above her, his face unreadable behind the blindfold. She could not see his eyes, could not know if he believed the lies Varen had spun. "Your Majesty," Varen said smoothly, "the traitor has been captured. She was attempting to flee through the servants' passages. Surely this confirms her guilt." "I am innocent," Elira said, her voice steady despite her terror. "Lord Varen is the true traitor. He orchestrated the attacks, he murdered my family, he—" "Silence!" Varen backhanded her across the face, the blow splitting her lip. "You will not spread your lies in this court." The king still had not moved, had not spoken. "Your Majesty," Varen pressed, "the law is clear. Treason against the crown is punishable by death. I recommend immediate execution." The hall held its breath. Slowly, King Kaelin rose from his throne. He descended the steps with careful, measured movements, playing his role of blindness even now. "Bring her closer," he commanded. Guards dragged Elira forward until she knelt at his feet. She looked up at that impassive face, searching desperately for some sign that he believed her. His hand reached down, fingers finding her chin, tilting her face upward. "Is it true?" he asked quietly. "Are you the traitor who has been betraying my kingdom?" One word. She needed to say one word, and he would know. He would hear the truth in her voice, smell the innocence in her scent. "No," she whispered. For an endless moment, nothing happened. Then King Kaelin straightened, releasing her chin. "Take her to the tower," he said flatly. "She will await execution at dawn." Elira's heart shattered. As the guards hauled her to her feet and dragged her from the hall, she caught one final glimpse of the king standing motionless on the dais. And beside him, Lord Varen smiled the smile of a man who had already won. The tower cell was cold and dark, with only a narrow slit of window to mark the passage of time. Elira sat with her back against the stone wall, watching moonlight creep across the floor. The wolf's bane shackles still burned against her wrists, keeping her wolf suppressed, leaving her feeling hollow and incomplete. Dawn would bring her execution. A few short hours, and everything would end. She thought of her mother, burning on a pyre, while a 7-year-old girl screamed and screamed. She thought of the pack that had raised her, their bodies scattered across the thornwood clearing, and she thought of the king, his face blank and cold as he condemned her to death. He had abandoned her. After everything, after the secrets shared, and the almost kisses, and the promise that he would burn the kingdom before letting anyone harm her, he had abandoned her. "Mine," he had called her. What a bitter joke. The cell door groaned open. Elira looked up, expecting guards come to drag her to the execution block early. Instead, a cloaked figure slipped through the doorway. "Elira." Her breath caught. "What are you doing here?" King Kaelin crossed to her in 3 strides, falling to his knees before her. The blindfold was gone, his gaze blazing with fierce emotion. "I had to condemn you publicly," he said urgently, his hands finding her shackles. Varen was watching. "If I had shown any hesitation, he would have known everything. You let them take me," her voice cracked. "I thought you believed him." "Never." He produced a key, fitting it to the shackles. "I have believed nothing Varen has said for 3 years. But I needed time to position my loyal guards, time to ensure his co-conspirators could not escape." The shackles fell away, and Elira gasped as her wolf surged back to the surface. Finally free. "What happens now?" she demanded. "Now we end this." He helped her to her feet, his hands lingering on her arms. "My guards are moving through the castle as we speak, arresting Varen's allies. By morning, his entire network will be in chains." "And Varen himself?" The king's expression hardened. "Ancient wolf law demands trial by combat for crimes against the crown. He will face me in the old way. He killed my mother," Elira said quietly. "My entire pack." Kaelin stopped, turning to face her. His silver eyes gleamed in the darkness. "Then the kill is yours to claim," he said. "If you want it." The offer stunned her. In wolf society, the right to execute a traitor belonged to the alpha alone. To share that right was to acknowledge someone as equal, as partner, as mate. "I want it," she whispered. Something powerful blazed across his features. He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "Together then." But Elira, before we go, there is something you must know. His hands framed her shoulders, his gaze intense. When I touched you that first night, when I breathed your scent, my wolf recognized you. You are my mate, Elira. My true mate. The words resonated through her bones. Her wolf howled in recognition, in joy. But the bond is incomplete, he continued, shadow crossing his features. Your wolf has been suppressed for too long. The mate bond is pulling at you, trying to complete itself. Without a full awakening, the strain will kill you within days. Elira stared at him. The strange sensations she had felt, the aching pull toward him, the way her wolf grew more restless each day. It had not been mere attraction. It had been the bond demanding completion. Then I stop fighting, she said firmly. I accept what I am. His forehead pressed against hers. It will be dangerous, painful. I don't care. She gripped his tunic. I spent 16 years hiding. I won't die hiding too. The king's eyes blazed gold. Then let us finish this, he growled. Together, they descended through the castle's hidden passages, moving through shadows that seemed to part before their alpha king. Elira could feel her wolf straining beneath her skin, stronger than it had ever been since childhood. The mate bond pulsed between her and Kaelin, urging completion. But there was no time. Not yet. My personal guards have secured the entrances, Kaelin murmured. Varen believes he has won. He does not know his conspiracy has already crumbled. They emerged into the great hall, through a door hidden behind the throne. Nobles clustered in frightened groups, surrounded by guards whose loyalties were now clear. And at the center stood Lord Varen, his face twisting with dawning realization as he watched his co-conspirators being led away in chains. What is the meaning of this? He demanded as Kaelin stepped onto the dais. Your Majesty, I must protest. You must do nothing. The king's voice rang through the hall like a death knell. Accept face judgment for your crimes. And then, in full view of the assembled court, King Kaelin reached up and removed his blindfold. Gasps echoed through the hall. Nobles stumbled backward in shock, and Varen's face drained of all color as those piercing silver eyes fixed upon him with perfect, devastating clarity. You, Varen breathed. All this time, you could see every treasonous whisper, every secret meeting, every message you sent to our enemies. The king descended the steps slowly. I saw it all, Varen. I was simply waiting for you to reveal the full extent of your rot. Varen's shock transformed into desperate fury. You have no proof. I have your correspondence with the Northern Raiders, your payments to the assassins who tried to kill me 3 years ago, your orders for the Thornwood massacre. The king's voice hardened to steel. Did you think I would not eventually learn that you murdered my mate's family? The hall erupted in shocked murmurs. Mate. Every eye turned to Elira as she stepped onto the dais beside her king. The servant girl? Someone whispered. My true mate, Kaelin declared, and daughter of the Thornwood pack, whose slaughter Lord Varen ordered 16 years ago. Varen's composure shattered. His form began to shimmer, bones cracking and reforming as his wolf surged to the surface. If I am to die, he snarled through elongating fangs, I will take you both with me. He launched himself at the dais, a massive black wolf with murder in his golden eyes. But Kaelin was faster. The king's transformation was instantaneous, his human form exploding into a wolf of pure silver white, larger than any Elira had ever seen. He met Varen's charge with devastating force, and the two wolves crashed together in a tangle of fangs and claws. The court scrambled backward as the two alphas battled. Blood sprayed across the stone floor. Elira watched with her wolf screaming to join the fight. But the incomplete bond was draining her strength even as it demanded completion. Her vision blurred. Her knees buckled. Through dimming eyes, she saw Varen gain the upper hand. A vicious slash opened a wound across Kaelin's flank, sending the silver wolf crashing to the ground. Varen stood over him, jaws closing around the king's throat. No! The scream tore from Elira's chest, and with it came something else entirely. Power. Raw, primal, magnificent power that had been locked away since childhood, suppressed by fear and grief and the desperate need to survive. It erupted from her now, flooding through her veins, reshaping her bones, transforming her flesh. The pain was exquisite. Every cell in her body screamed as it was unmade and remade. But beneath the agony was freedom. Pure, wild, glorious freedom. When it ended, Alira stood on 4 legs, her fur the deep copper of autumn leaves, her eyes burning gold. She was Wolf. Finally, completely, irrevocably, Wolf. And her mate was dying. Alira launched herself at Varen with a howl that shook the very stones of the castle. She hit him like a thunderbolt, tearing him away from Kaelin's throat, her fangs finding the soft flesh of his shoulder. Varen twisted, trying to throw her off, but she was faster than she had ever been. The mate bond sang through her veins, lending her strength she had never known she possessed. She was not just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for her mate, her king, her future, for everything Varen had stolen from her. Her jaws found his throat. One bite, one savage, final bite, and Lord Varen, murderer of her mother, destroyer of her pack, traitor to the crown, went still beneath her. Alira stood over his body, chest heaving, and blood dripping from her muzzle. The great hall was utterly silent, then a warm presence pressed against her side. Kaelin. Wounded but alive, his silver fur matted with blood, his eyes meeting hers with overwhelming love and pride. My mate, he breathed into her mind, the bond finally open enough to carry thoughts. My brave, beautiful mate. Alira turned to face him, and instinct guided what happened next. She pressed her muzzle to his throat, to the pulse that beat strong despite his wounds. And then, with the entire court watching, she bit down, not to harm, to claim. The bond exploded into completion. Their souls crashed together, merging and intertwining until she could no longer tell where she ended, and he began. His memories flooded through her. A lonely childhood, the assassination attempt, the long years of pretending weakness while hunting for traitors. And her memories flowed into him. Her mother's death, years of hiding, the terror and wonder of finding him. When it ended, they stood together in the great hall, 2 wolves bound by something older than time. Slowly, they shifted back to human form. Kaelin pulled her into his arms, heedless of the blood that covered them both. My queen, he said, loud enough for the entire court to hear. My mate, my heart. Alira looked up at him, at this impossible man who had seen through every mask she had ever worn, and loved what he found beneath. My king, she whispered back. My mate, my future. He kissed her then, deep and fierce and claiming, and the court erupted into cheers. Later, as sunset painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson, they stood together on the balcony overlooking Valdrin. What happens now? Alira asked, leaning into his warmth. Now we rebuild. His arm tightened around her. Now we rule together, as it was always meant to be. I was a servant 2 months ago. You were never just a servant. He turned her to face him, his silver eyes soft with love. You were always meant for this. For me, I think some part of me knew it the moment you stumbled behind that pillar and I caught your scent. Alira laughed, the sound surprising her. When had she last laughed freely? The blind king who could see everything, she teased. And the invisible maid who caught his eye. Not invisible. He cupped her face in his hands. Never invisible. Not to me. He kissed her again, softer this time, a promise of all the years to come. Below them, wolves began to howl, their voices rising in celebration of their new queen. And Alira, daughter of Thornwood, survivor of tragedy, mate of the Alpha King, finally understood what she had been searching for her entire life. Not just safety, not just belonging, but the place where she was truly seen,